Overwatch 2 Season 3 has a very interesting meta taking place, definitely a very high skill one, but these 3 characters will help you climb up the ranks relatively easily. Today, we are going to go over these 3 heroes, talk a little bit about what makes them so strong this season, and also give a few tips and tricks for how to play them and start climbing. If you want 2023 to be the year you finally break into GM, then you need to come and check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have hundreds of guides built by some of the best coaches in the game, designed specifically to help you soar up the Overwatch 2 ranked ladder, and they are all available for an absolute steal. Follow the link in the description below or go to GameLeap.com to get your subscription today. Okay, we are going to start with the DPS role first, and I think that this season, by far, the best character to begin your climb with is going to be Soldier 76. Soldier received a pretty big buff this season, giving him a lot more forgiveness on his recoil, which definitely makes him a lot easier to get into, and since he's already a pretty simple character to actually play, this is huge. Having a lower recoil means that you're going to do more damage on average over the course of a game, and it's overall going to allow you to have a lot more impact on your ranked matches. Soldier is also a very mobile character in general, so he fits really well into what the meta is right now, as we're starting to see more Wrecking Ball and more Tracer being played. He's able to reposition and shift where he's playing a lot easier than most other heroes, and he can do all of that without the super high movement floor that someone like Tracer has, where you have to be very, very good at managing your blinks and judging distance. Soldier just sort of runs around. Soldier is definitely a very appealing DPS right now, because on top of having that very easy to grasp movement and also being able to do a ton of damage, especially over longer fights, he even has his own source of healing, which means that you can actually play separately and sort of isolate yourself if you want to go on a flank, or if you want to take it a step forward and be a very helpful teammate, you can play next to your backline and drop a heal pad when they get dove. Some general pieces of advice for navigating Soldier in this meta are going to be pay very close attention to what high grounds you can get to, but also be wary of how split that you have to be from your supports when you go there, because with a more dive oriented meta taking form, with a lot of ball and tracer being played, especially as you get higher in rank, you don't want to be caught too far alone, because you're going to be dove by multiple people. They're going to be able to kill you. Even with your self heal, it's not going to be that great, so make sure when you're going for these high grounds, you're A, paying attention to where your supports are and whether or not you're within their LOS, and B, you're paying attention to what people can dive you and whether or not they're going to be able to get to you. Another really big thing I don't see enough soldiers doing is placing your heal pad right before you use your ultimate. Both Soldier's heal pad and his ultimate stop him from shooting for a couple of seconds while the ability comes online, so you can actually combine these two by pressing your heal pad button and then your ult button right afterwards. This means that you can save a lot of time by not having to wait out 2 different animations before you can start fighting people, and by combining them, you're actually going to have a much more effective ultimate. Every second is absolutely instrumental when it comes to ultimates, especially ones that have a limited timeline, such as Genji's Dragon Blade or Soldier 76's Tactical Visor. So you really want to minimize how much time you spend staring at an animation versus actually being able to deal damage to your opponent. Overall, Soldier is a very easy to understand hero. He's very much a pick up and play sort of character, but even despite that, he has a lot of power this season. He's very strong and he fits the meta extremely well. I mean, the meta is very mobile, so he can actually play right into that super easily. Moving on into the tank role, I know we've up to this point talked a lot about how good Wrecking Ball is this season. However, he is a very high skill hero that requires a lot of effort and a lot of training, so he's not something that you can easily just start climbing with right away. A very strong second option that is much more easy to understand and can get almost as much value is actually going to be Arisa right now. Arisa has a lot of sustainability right now. It's pretty difficult to kill her due to her cooldown rotation, which we'll come back to in just a second, but also she does a ton of damage and has one of the best stuns in the game. Arisa's ultimate is also surprisingly powerful once you get it down, and can actually secure you a very steady flow of picks and teamfight wins if you use it correctly. Her primary fire is also pretty forgiving, so it's not that hard to sort of get into the groove of being able to hit a lot of shots and put out a decent amount of damage even if you don't have the best aim. The single most important tip that I have for Arisa, and it's really easy to forget this one, but you absolutely must get it down pat, and that is being sure that you properly rotate your javelin spin and your fortify. These two abilities are what make Arisa so impossible to kill, and if you try to use them at the same time, it's a huge waste because they are just sort of negating each other. Think about it like this. Fortify is going to give you 75 extra health, it's going to reduce your damage intake by 40%, and you can't be headshot when you are fortified. Her Javelin Spin, however, is going to actually just delete all damage aside from stuff that comes from beams like Zarya or Winston or Symmetra, those kinds of things that shoot through defense matrix. So if you're using these both at the same time, your Javelin Spin is going to be eating all the damage and you're not getting any benefit from the damage reduction that your Fortify has. So generally you want to actually cycle these abilities so that you can get their max benefit from each. Usually I'll end up using Javelin Spin to start getting some space and walking forward, and then I'll use my Fortify when I start taking a bit of damage and I need to heal up. There's really two reasons for this. One, when people see an Arisa walking forward, that's generally when they start using their burst damage abilities, so think like Hanzo Storm Arrow and that sort of thing. And being able to completely negate that with Javelin Spin is actually a lot better than just reducing it by 40% with Fortify. And the second thing is that even though Fortify is going to reduce your damage intake, it doesn't reduce your heal intake. So once you start taking a little bit of damage, you pop your Fortify to stay up when you're maybe half or a little bit above half HP, and suddenly the enemies are wanting to kill you because they see you're weak, but they just can't do enough damage because you can't be headshot and you have that damage reduction, and your healers are still going to be healing you, hopefully. And as for the last major tip that you should know before you start diving into Arisa and playing her more is that for your ultimate, you will actually deal a killing blow to 200 HP targets at around 160% charge. Now with Nano Boost, which is actually going to be a common thing you get in this meta with Arisa because you're going to have a lot of Anas, you can actually end up getting a killing blow at 110% or so. It's important to know these numbers, that way you know the best time to pop your ultimate. Sometimes you're going to be able to get a bunch of killing blows if they're slowed or, anything is sort of affecting their movement otherwise, but it can be just as powerful to just do a ton of damage and weaken them all. That way your team can come in and clean up the team fight afterwards, or you can follow up on your own damage even. And we finally are going to move into the support role for the best climbing hero in Season 3. We have Moira. And for our returning viewers, this might be a little bit confusing or surprising because in our tier list, I actually have Moira rated pretty low and say that she's not a super powerful, super carry heavy hero. And I am not going to go back on that because honestly, a really good Ana or really good Kiriko is absolutely going to get way more value than a really good Moira. However, the real reason that Moira actually thrives in ranked is that she's not only easy to get pretty good at the hero, but she is also really easy to be consistent at the hero. Due to her pretty versatile nature, where she can play very DPS heavy or very heal heavy and neither require a ton of mechanics or aim, you can actually get a ton of value on Moira as long as you know at a basic level what you need to do on her. She's also a pretty solid pick into this meta because there's going to be a lot of divers, and Moira is notoriously difficult to dive due to her fade ability and her self-heal. There's two major tips that I want to make sure you have before you go in and start locking Moira in your ranked games though. Number one is don't spam your fade, because as soon as your fade comes off, you're going to be a lot more susceptible to being dove. So make sure you're using that as a pretty defensive ability, or you're using it to chase down picks that you're absolutely certain you can get. There are times where Moiras see that they're a little bit split from their tank and then they end up using their fade to catch up to them, but you're going to end up in a very dangerous position if you do that, because now you're close to the front line and you don't have your fade to get out of danger. So be a little bit more conservative with it and make sure you only use your fade when you have a very, very clear purpose in doing so. The second tip that I see a lot of people forget on Moira is to always use a orb right before you use your ultimate. This will allow you to either use your damage orb and increase the damage you're doing in your ultimate if you're sort of going for picks on squishy targets, or use your healing orb and be able to do a lot more burst healing for your teammates. Not only does this increase how effective your ultimates are since you have a little bit of extra numbers to back you up, but also as soon as you come out of your ultimate, you'll get your orb back anyway from the cooldown. And when you're using your Cole, you can't actually use any other abilities, so having an orb ready and not using it ahead of time is just sort of a waste. I hope you enjoyed and see some good results using these heroes. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more educational news and guide content, and I will see you all again very soon. Take care and peace. If you want 2023 to be the year you finally break into GM, then you need to come and check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have hundreds of guides built by some of the best coaches in the game, designed specifically to help you soar up the Overwatch 2 ranked ladder, and they are all available for an absolute steal. Follow the link in the description below or go to GameLeap.com to get your subscription today.